36. Jeremiah chapter 36. We'll get into our study together again. See, you don't have to train it back up to the backup back there in the back. That's a lot of backups, isn't it? But, anyway, that's why I've been back there. Sam usually does that with the Bible study, and Rick Hayes has not been able to be with us recently much on Wednesdays, and so I may have to train somebody else to push a couple of buttons back there in the back as we start on Wednesday evenings. We're in chapter 36 of our study of the book of Jeremiah. I'm going to do something a little different tonight, maybe to help. Because we are speeding up because it's repetitive. We're dealing with the same basic people, same basic issues, same basic problems. And within the text, then there'll be moments that are different. We're going to have one of those moments here in Jeremiah chapter 36 where something very different occurs in relationship to Jehoiakim and his complete disrespect and disregard for God and the message that comes through Jeremiah. We'll see that eventually in our text. But what I'm going to do with you tonight is share with you, Lord willing, on the screen, the ability to see an outline as we go so that you can kind of know what pocket of verses that I'm talking about. So we'll use the scriptures that you're usually used to seeing there on the screen, and we'll also share with you an outline so that you can kind of know at what point in time that we are in a particular chapter. If I tend to go a little too fast, you'll kind of know what text or portion of the text that we're dealing with. This message in chapter 36 comes at what point in time? That's right. Jehoiakim's reign in the 4th year of that reign. That's kind of significant because we're going to kind of see an interesting moment here later, and not that much later in the chapter, where that time period has leaked several months just from the moment that this occurs in verse 1 until we see some things happening with Baruch and some issues later, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. But I want you to notice in relationship to this particular moment. So what's Jeremiah told to do in verses 1 and 2? Okay, he's told to write this down, okay? This is one of those moments where God says it's not enough for him to just go and present it. In fact, that's going to be a challenge. Why? He's not allowed out, okay? He's not really been given much permission at this stage. We'll get some liberties later, we'll see, as we continue to study tonight. But in this moment here, he is not permitted, and so he calls for Baruch to come and assist him in this matter because Jeremiah is not permitted to just go and leave and come back as he pleases. And so if this message is going to be able to be presented, then he's going to have some assistance. So God says, write it down and present it before the people. Notice with me in verse 3 then. If so be the house of Israel do what? If they'll hear and change. Okay, we're still talking about trying to get the people to return. We're still dealing with the need for repentance. We're still dealing with this encouragement, this attempt to get God's people from the leaders on down to recognize that their behaviors are sinful, their practices don't own up to what God desires from them. Change needs to occur. And they have yet to see it among the people as yet. And He still desires that they turn from their evil ways in relationship to these things. So God wants them to return in verse 3, and then in verses 4 through 8, and notice that Baruch does what? He does what he was asked to do. He's asked to come and write down the message, and then do what with it? Take it and read it to the people. And so here's this. It's one thing if the message comes and they don't do anything with it. What benefit would the message of God be if it's not presented into the ears of people, right? That's never changed, by the way. What value, from a change standpoint of turning lives over to God, what value do the Scriptures have if they're not shared with the people? If they're not presented before the ears of those who need to know the message of God, then they don't have the value that they're intended to have. And that issue hasn't changed. The same thing today. What's God's Word need to be done? What do we need to do with it? It needs to be taught. It needs to be presented. It needs to be shared. That message needs to continue to be declared before the ears of the people people so that they might also recognize the benefit of God and recognize the salvation that He offers. The circumstances have changed. The piece of history we're dealing with has changed. But the core of the problem is the people needed to listen to God. And that's never changed. People still need to listen to God. They still need to hear His message. They still need to respond and react to the things God is trying to encourage them in. And so that's what you see there in verses 4 through 8. Jeremiah calls for him to come. He tells him, I'm restrained in verse 5. And let me jump into it. I had Young's literal up for my own purposes. Let me share with you a little more not easily read, but maybe a little more sentence-like translation here in the American Standard. So Baruch comes. Jeremiah says in verse 5, I can't go. I'm shut up. I can't leave. I need you to go and read the roll which has been written from my mouth, the words of Jehovah in the ears of the people. And where is he supposed to do that at? Go into Jehovah's house when? Upon the fast day. And also thou shalt read them in the ears of all Judah that come out of their city. So he gives Baruch a specific and a generic, we might say, from an authoritative standpoint. The specific is, go read it when? During the fast day. That's a specific. And then what else is he given more generically? At any point you encounter folks as they're coming into the city, as they're traveling out of their cities, when you encounter them, share this message. Okay? Make sure you're there on the fast day. Make sure you're there when the largest audience among the nation is going to be present at the house of God. Make sure you're there on that day. But in the meantime, continue to share it as folks keep coming from their respective places that they live, and that they will present their supplication before Jehovah and will return everyone from his evil way. For great is the anger and the wrath that Jehovah hath pronounced against this people. Judgment's coming. The people need to know that. Their leaders aren't telling them that. And so Baruch, you get to the most populous place, Jerusalem. You get there when folks from all over the place are going to be coming to town. So you have the largest audience possible. And just in case they don't happen to come to the fast day, you tell them as you see them coming out of their different cities. So a specific moment in time he's dealing with, and also a generic idea of sharing this message. So when does this fast day occur? And fast, by the way, not the manner in which I'm teaching this class, but fast as in don't eat. Okay? Okay. Okay, the 5th year. All right? And in specific, he says in the 5th year, and I think in the 9th month. So we've gone from when the message, Jeremiah gets to write all this down, and gets Baruch to come and help him. That was in the 4th year. So we are at least how much further into history before this day of fasting occurs?
1 year and 9 months.
Well, I mean, you could shrink it as low as 9 months. If I was on the last day of the 4th year of Jehoiakim's reign, and then I moved 9 months forward, I would be in the 9th month of his 5th year of his reign. And so at least 9 months, if not a little longer. Most likely, I would say it's within the year time period. And the reason I say that is because Jeremiah knows what's coming. Because he tells him a specific day to be there. That fast day is coming, right? Jeremiah's aware of it. Jeremiah knows that there's a, lack of a better term, a festival. It's not much of a festival in the midst of the besiegement challenges the people are having. But there's a day where they're going to come together and fast before the Lord. Jeremiah knows it's a specific day that's going to occur, and he tells Baruch, make sure that you get there on that day. And so there are lots, again, that's one of those things. As soon as you mention this text, I'm just going to say, well, what was this day? Ask 12 scholars, you'll get 12 answers. Okay, we don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us specifically what it could be in commemoration, if you will, of Nebuchadnezzar's initial besiegement of the place. And they're coming to fast before the Lord in hopes they can resolve it. Others tell you different things that potentially it could have been. Varieties of reasons why they may have been coming. All of them just as plausible. The Bible doesn't tell us which reasoning it is. And so we just simply know that Jeremiah knew it was coming. He tells Baruch to be there when it gets there. And the people came and were there present when these events, now that are being described from verses 10 forward, begin to occur. I'll breathe. Thoughts and questions up through verse 8.
They came to seek help at this particular time.
Yeah, it's a petition before Jehovah, so it's not a celebration.
Right.
You don't fast, the fasting and the petition before Jehovah gives us, it's a solemn thing. One quick thought, who is interestingly absent in this great national event? The king. The king's nowhere to be found. In fact, it's going to be a couple layers before we get this message into the king's hands. But the king's not present, obviously, because it has to go through some hoops before we get to Jehoiakim.
When Rock and Terry read this, what type of a worship or what? I mean, could just anybody come in and start speaking, or how was he allowed to come if they knew Jeremiah and they didn't like what he was saying anyway?
Yeah, I don't technically know the answer to that because we're not told. But all I know is that this is a national assembly, and so there's not as much of an official capacity to it as there is a national gathering that allows for him to get anybody really to get a voice because just the sheer number that are available to you. I don't know. This isn't Passover. This isn't. I mean, I guess I can say. I think I can say that because I believe it would say. If it was one of the Jewish festivals, it would say that, not just a day of fasting. But it's a national gathering that all are invited to come to petition God through this. So in some senses, I don't know how it is, but all I know is he gets it. He gets an honor.
It's in the 9th month, so
yeah.
those other ones were in different months.
Right, and so this corresponds to actually our last month. This corresponds to our December, if I remember the calendar right. And where is, fast forward, then we'll go back and we'll come back. But where's Jehoiakim here in a little bit? In his winter home. Okay, he's in his winter home. And so it's an interesting dynamic here that we're dealing with in terms of the time. So Baruch comes, verse 10, and he reads. He reads from the book of the words that Jeremiah had told him. And who's there? You don't have to say him by name, but who's there? Okay, leaders, in particular, scribes, okay? In particular, the scribes are there, okay? Those who would have the easiest ability to be able to read and understand this message that has been written down. And in specific, they're in the chamber of Gemariah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe, in the upper court at the entry of the new gate of Jehovah's house in the ears of all the people. So he found the right spot to get the audience that he needed to proclaim this particular message. And so from verses 10 through 13, what you have then is this fellow by the name of Micaiah steps forward. And depending on, again, who you read from, he's probably a public scribe, or some even relate him a little bit to what maybe a Secretary of State might be in relationship to more modern governments. Because he's going to get an ear, right? He's going to go talk to the princes here in a little bit, and he's going to be able to get in there and talk to those who are the closest to the king. And so he seems to have a more official capacity than just your average scribe who happened to have heard Baruch speaking. This Micaiah has an ability to go to the court of the king and start talking to the leadership that the king has surrounded himself with, and tell them about this message that Jeremiah sent. And so when he goes, they're sitting there, verse 12, and they list all those guys, and including who, by the way, interesting, at the end of verse 12, Zedekiah the son of Hananiah, okay, and all the princes. And then Micaiah declared unto them all the words that he had heard when Baruch read the book in the ears of the people. So Micaiah hears it. He says, this is something the king needs to hear. he can't get a straight audience with the king. I got to go to those who have audience with the king. And so he goes to the princes that are gathered there, and he says, you guys need to listen to this. You all need to hear what Jeremiah sent by message through Baruch to the nation down here at the national fasting that was going on. Keep in mind, that's an important element. I don't want to race too fast beyond it that we don't consider that. Because this message has been heard now by a large audience. This national fast day has arrived. He gets the best audience he can by going to the new gate, he says there at the house of God, a place where many would be gathering at this particular time. And so when Micaiah goes and talks to the princes and says and gives them the accounting of what has happened, part of that accounting is going to be, he said all this before everybody. Everybody heard the message of judgment that Jeremiah sent. And so that becomes a bigger deal. If this was just a message that went straight to the king that the people had not heard, then you might react differently. But now you've got to respond to this because everybody's heard what Jeremiah said. Everybody's listening, has heard it, so how are we going to react to that? So verse 14. When they hear it from Micaiah's mouth, what do they want to do? That doesn't content them. What do they want? Back up one more step before that. The princes call, that's right, I think I heard somebody say. He says, you get Baruch and we want to hear it from him. Okay? Not that we don't trust you, but you go get Baruch and you bring him down here. Because we want to hear this from him. And what's their reaction? Fear. They're scared. Okay? Verse 15. Sit down now. Read it in our ears. I could be mistaken here, but let me give you a little bit of a feel of the room that I sense here. Okay? The princes hear it from Micaiah that Baruch was saying these things from Jeremiah. They call for Baruch and they come up here and you can imagine. Here they are, the power, the authority, the elites. They tell Baruch, scribe, sit down here. You say it in front of us. You were brave out there amongst the people to present this message of destruction and poor leadership and the sins of the nation and all the sin. You say it in front of me. You say it in front of us. And see whether or not the message changes or not. When it doesn't, he speaks all the words. They turned in fear, verse 16, one toward another, and said unto Baruch, we will surely tell the king all these words. It scares them. It startles them to think that this judgment is on the horizon. And we got to go tell the king. There's an interesting conversation that occurs, verses 17 through 19. Because it breaks for a moment in the narrative, and they ask an interesting question. What do they ask, Baruch? Yeah, how'd you write all this stuff down? Okay? And the implication of that was that Baruch didn't even what? He didn't understand it all either. Okay? He didn't know all the words and the things that were being said either, because what's he say that Jeremiah did? Yeah, he dictated it to me. Okay? He didn't just give me a synopsis and say, go give them this general idea. He dictated this to me. He pronounced these words. This came directly from the prophet. This was no, paraphrased, cliff note version of what Jeremiah had said. This was the dictated statements. This is what Jeremiah said, and I wrote it down just like he told me to write it down. That's where I got it from. Those were the things that I heard from him.
These are the same words he's been talking all along, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's not, the message hasn't really changed. No. And we're bouncing.
Why would they listen to this, but they wouldn't listen to him to begin with?
Some of the message we've been studying, though, went to Zedekiah. We've backed up in history to Jehoiakim. So we're bouncing a little. So some of them may or may not have heard certain details. But it's enough detail scares them. So much so that when they figure the king hears it, they think he's going to have a favorable reaction. Now we know he doesn't, because we can read ahead. But they don't think he's going to have a favorable reaction, because what does he tell Baruch to do? You go get Jeremiah. You better hide. Because we don't have any choice. We need to go talk to the king about this. We need to go tell the king what's been happening. You might want to consider going and find a hiding place, because he is not going to like what he's about to hear. We actually find later that who gets involved in that hiding place, who helps them. If you read ahead, well, I guess we'll have to wait.
Was it Jeremiah in prison at this time? How does he kind of hide?
Yeah, it's. Well, I don't. He was at the beginning. Remember, that's 4th year Jehoiakim. We are at least 9 months, if not further ahead. And as we keep reading, we're going to find that he gets some liberty when the besiegement kind of settles down for a little while. And so at this point, he might have already reached the liberties that we're going to see him have later in the text. All right, so they go to the king, verse 20. They go into the court, but what they do with the scroll or the roll? Okay, so they put the scroll away, and then they go tell the king. And what's the king say? Verse 21. Hey, go get that scroll. Okay, you're telling me all these things that this scroll has to say. Why don't you go fetch that scroll? Verse 21. And he took it out of the chamber of Elishama the scribe, and Jehoiada read it in the ears of the king, and in the ears of all the princes that stood beside the king. How many of you would want the job of having to read that to the king? I don't think I'm getting in line for that job, right? Because I don't know what he's going to do. I don't have any idea how he's going to react to this. I just know that most likely it's not going to be good. Okay? You'd like for it to be good. You'd like for the king to see it as God's message, react to it, repent, turn the nation around. Good things happen, but they don't anticipate that. Okay? No one likes to be the bearer of bad news. Okay? It's not a pleasant place to be. And it's not a pleasant place for Jehoiada. But here's the interesting part. So Jehoiada in verses 21 through 23 goes and gets the scroll. And he begins to read it. And what's Jehoiada do? He gets out his penknife or a knife. And how far in, by the way?
About 3 feet.
Yeah, the text says about 3 or 4 leaves. Not very far. Okay? Not very far into this. And he just takes it and he begins to cut it into pieces. Is he content with that? No. The text says because he's in his winter home, he's got a fire going, and he takes the pieces and he throws them in the fire. The interesting parallel is that though it may not happen literally as much today as it did with him, folks take their penknife in scriptures all the time. They find what they like, and they leave that, and they find what they dislike, and they take their mental penknife and start cutting it out. I've actually encountered one person in my life that didn't just trust their mental ability to cut it out, they literally cut it out. I quoted 1 Peter 3:21 to a lady one time, and she said, "That's not in my Bible." And I was a young preacher, and I said, "You better believe it's in your Bible. Give me your Bible, I'll turn right to it." And I flipped right over there, and it wasn't in there. There's a hole. There's a hole right there. It wasn't in there. She was right. She wasn't lying. It wasn't there. And I thought, and I mentioned this. I said, it looks like you've got Jehoiakim's penknife, because that's what he did. It was very quick that he did not appreciate the message that he was hearing. And his answer was, not react favorably, not change my ways, not do something better. But my answer to that is, get those leaves, cut them up, and burn them up. It's interesting, if you read on verse 24, or you see that complete disrespect that they have, what I want to note with you, he said he cut it up, put it in the fire, verse 23, until all the roll was consumed in the fire that was in the brazier, and they were not afraid, nor rent their garments, neither the king nor any of his servants that heard all these words.
They should have.
If that doesn't tell us the character and the circumstances of the king and his immediate cabinet, then nothing will. That speaks volumes to who these men have become. That they would take the message of God from a prophet that, why do you think Jeremiah has been imprisoned at times, not given liberties at times? Why do you think they're confining him?
Trying to stop
the message.
And why would you need to stop his message?
Because
in a literal way. Because it's true. It's exactly right, Ed. Because it's true. You don't. If Jeremiah is being found out a liar every time he says something, do they worry about him? No. They're not concerned about him at all. If he's found out to be untruthful in all these things that he's saying, and remember that's the test of a prophet, right? The things that he says are not true. If he had been untruthful, they wouldn't be worried about him. I don't know how they become so brazen that they would cut this message in pieces and throw it in the fire. But yet men today are still as brazen. We'll take segments and thoughts from God's Word that are so plainly understood and can be seen, and we'll ignore them and reject them and mentally cut them from their Scriptures. And not much different than what Jehoiakim has done.
No repentance there.
Yeah.
Or not even a sign of repentance.
Yeah. No rending their clothes, no nothing. I find it interesting, verse 25. Moreover, Elnathan and Delaiah and that fella too, had made intercession to the king that he would not burn the roll, but he would not hear them. So in the midst of this, you can almost see him take those first 3 or 4 leaves, and the knife goes, and you can see him start taking that and throw it in the fire, and these scribes that are with him are and that takes courage, by the way, to me, for them to say, are you sure you want to do that? Do you really want to burn this message up? It's one thing to be frustrated and cut it up, but you can cut it up and we might be able to piece it back together if we need it. But if you burn it, it's gone. Little do they know it's not gone, right? It's all going to happen again here in just a few moments. But that's what happens. They begged him not to, but he ignored them. And what's the king tell him to go do? You go get Jeremiah and Baruch. The king was encouraged not to burn it, but he didn't listen. So he tells the servants, you go get Baruch and Jeremiah. Excuse me, you bring them to me. But why couldn't he find him? Yeah, there was my question earlier I asked you, by the way. Who was helping? And the answer to that is the Lord was. Okay? He tries to get rid of all that message. And he's burned it all up, and he wants them to come. But the Lord was aiding. When the word of Jehovah came to Jeremiah after that the king had burned the roll, and the words which Baruch wrote at the mouth of Jeremiah, saying, take thee again another roll, and write it in it all the former words that were in the first roll, which Jehoiakim the king of Judah hath burned. So you go, write it all down again. Go ahead, Bob.
I have a little bit of confusion on this chronological order going on here. According to Daniel, first Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. And now we're talking here about the 4th year of Jehoiakim. So at this present time,
5th year, actually.
Huh?
We're in the 5th year.
At this present time, Jerusalem is under siege. Now, are these people able to come and go out of the city of Jerusalem, or is all this taking place inside the wall of Jerusalem?
Well, keep in mind that you're going to see, and I'm trying to think of my own timing in my mind as we move ahead, because there is a reprieve. They besiege, But then Egypt comes and distracts them, which we're going to see in the next chapter.
Well, they withdrew it.
And they withdraw. And so I don't know whether we're dealing with potentially in and around that same time period. But I'd have to look. But obviously they're able to get into Jerusalem.
I was thinking that the withdrawal was later on in the chapter, maybe in 37, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely in chapter 37 that we'll deal. And I'll have to look, because you actually change the kings in chapter 37 as well. But obviously it seems to me that for what, and you talk about the besiegers though, the total annihilation is not coming till later. And Jerusalem was the Mecca, the point in which everybody was fleeing to. And so it's obvious somehow or some way that people were able to get to Jerusalem from the countryside. We even saw earlier, brain's not clicking at the moment, but there was a group of individuals from the countryside who had found their way into Jerusalem. So people were obviously finding their way. How? I don't know how to answer that, but it's obviously all are able to get into the city at this point still.
So this second scroll, is this what we have written right here? Is this what Jeremiah is right here? Is this the second scroll that they have written down?
Well, I don't think it can be all of it, because you can't give everything to Jehoiakim that Jeremiah talks about, because half of what Jeremiah talks about happens during the time of Zedekiah. He's next.
Oh yeah, I understand that, but I mean what he wrote down here. Is that part of what we have right here?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that that's the message. The message hasn't changed. I'd have to go look, Ed, to tell you whether there's any evidence as to whether, because we don't have any of that. In you know what I mean? In literal senses, all we have are copies of anything. And so where those copies came from, I'd have to look.
The second scroll was a lot longer than the first one, because it told about what's going to happen to Jehoiakim.
Right, there's more written in the second time. It has all of the first and second. But I think the question is more about, is that what was the original source of portions of what we have in the book of Jeremiah today? And that's a good question. I'll look. Obviously, the message is, whether it's that literal copy or not, I don't know whether we'd ever be able to know that for sure. Okay, so what's ultimately going to happen to Jehoiakim? Okay, he's going to be delivered. Jeremiah tells him that. You're going to get delivered. Difficulties are going to come. Jeremiah is told to write it all down again. Consequences are coming to Jehoiakim. And Jeremiah did what he was told to do, as he's always done at the end of that chapter. Okay. Real quick then, go back now to your lesson sheets. Use these by way of review. That's what I meant by changing my pattern just a little bit with you. So what was the command of God to Jeremiah?
Write it down.
Go write these things down, okay? And get it read. For what purpose? That the people might what? Okay. Repent or return unto God. So what's the mission of Baruch? What charge did Jeremiah give to him? Go read it. Okay. Go read it where?
All the people.
People at the house of God, and in particular on the day of this national fast. What was the reaction of the various listeners? Okay, fear eventually comes to some of them, right? Fear comes. But what was the king's reaction? Okay, that's a good word there. He disrespected or disregarded that which he had been given. Did anybody try to stop the king? Yeah, some of the scribes begged the king to not do these things. What was God's next command to Jeremiah after it was all, the first scroll was all burned up? Write it again, okay? He tells him, go do that again. Just write it all down again, and more, verse 32 says, was given. What was the new message of the Lord? Judgment on who? Jehoiakim. Okay, judgment on Jehoiakim is what was coming. What's the primary lesson out of this text?
God's message stands true whether we accept it or not.
Okay, whether people accept the message or not doesn't change the message. And you can take your penknife to the scriptures, mental or literal, all day long, and it won't change what God has said. And with that, is it respectful or disrespectful to God's message to try to eliminate any part of it? It's disrespectful. It's a shame to see they had no fear, no concept that they were doing anything evil when that happened. Go ahead, Roger.
When the root was reading this to the people coming and going, they thought they had not heard it.
Yeah.
Because the king didn't believe it, and so he wasn't about to pass the message along. So what about the lesson for us today is we must do our own study
Yeah.
in case somebody we're listening to doesn't tell us everything.
Yeah.
As some even in the church have started doing.
Yeah.
And we can't add or take away.
That's right. We can't add or take it. We've got to accept the whole message. And we've got to take some personal accountability to that. To be sure that what's being said and taught is accurate. And accept some personal responsibility to make sure of that. Anything else you noted or thought of in terms of application?
In Psalms, it tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and these people certainly didn't have fear. So
Yeah. At least the wrong people were the only ones that had fear. And unfortunately, the one voice that seemed to matter was the king's, and he's influencing everybody and how they're reacting to this. But if they had enough fear of the Lord, they would have accepted the wisdom that came from the message.
Psalms also says that the word of God is eternal.
Yeah.
Regardless of what man tries to do, you can't destroy it.
Yeah. God's message, because He is eternal, His thoughts and His purposes and His message is eternal. You can do whatever you choose to do, and you can reap the consequences of that, but you're not going to get rid of the message, no matter what you try.
Some people will listen.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a hidden thing here, Jim, but I think there were some positive reactions to this until it got in the hands of the king. And I don't want to be overly speculative, but we don't have the whole conversation. We don't know everything that they're telling the king and every thought that they're sharing with him. But if he doesn't have any fear that this message will influence the people, then he get rid of it. There's no need to cut it up, burn it up in the fire. But they're telling, hey, he's down there saying to the people. The people are listening. The princes were afraid. The scribes were paying attention to it. And the king said, oh, take care of that. Just get rid of the message. Just get rid of it.
He had a bigger audience than Jeremiah does, because he got all the surrounding towns.
Right, people were flooding into Jerusalem and the numbers were growing. Yeah. Okay.
The king said, I don't care if you hear it, I'm going to show you what I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Jump to chapter 37. You got a few minutes. Whether I get it all in or not, I don't know. It's a short chapter with a simplistic kind of thought going on inside. So, fast forward, okay, a little bit in history. Who comes on the scene in chapter 37? Zedekiah, okay? Condemnation brought against Jehoiakim, prior chapter. We move into this chapter, and now we're to the time that Zedekiah has been chosen to serve as king over the people. But what's the problem? According to verse 2. No, they don't do any better. That's the problem. The problem is they're not any better. Okay? You've got a new king, but then hell, because he and his servants and those that he has placed in charge and authority, they're not any better than the prior groups had been. In verses 3 and 4, Jeremiah is in this moment. Again, you have to fast forward. Jeremiah doesn't write in chronological order. Okay, he'll jump years. He'll jump backwards decades. It's not chronological order, so you can't read it chapter 1 through 52 or 51. How many ever it is? Always reverse it. But as you move forward, you're not going to see a day-by-day chronological order. He bounces all over the place because he writes more stuff. The chapters are collected more in groupings than they are for chronology. Style. Some sections are sermon style. Some sections are historical style. Some sections are focused on specific messages to specific people. So they're grouped in pockets of purpose. Not so much day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and here we go. That's just not how it is. It just doesn't work that way. And so it can be confusing trying to figure it out. And if you throw in some of the things that the Septuagint manuscripts have, you could be even more confused. So we won't do that. But here's this message that has jumped forward to the time of Zedekiah. And by this time, Jeremiah is given more liberty. And he's asked by Zedekiah if he'll petition God on behalf of the nation. Does that happen? Not in the manner that Zedekiah is hoping for. He's hoping for a reprieve. Can we get away from all these things? But that's not going to ultimately be the message that comes. There is a reprieve on the nation, though, because of whom? Egypt. Okay? Egypt comes up, and they begin to wage war, and they distract the Babylonians for a short period of time. In verses 5 through 8, though, Jeremiah tells Zedekiah, don't be what? Don't be fooled by this. Okay? This is temporary. Okay? Don't be fooled by this distraction from Egypt that has caused the Babylonians to not be paying attention to you right now. Eventually, Babylon's coming back, and Egypt's going where? They're going back home. Okay? So don't be fooled by this moment of peace because it's a temporary blip on the historical radar.
This is where I was confused how they could come and go in Jerusalem because they didn't withdraw until Zedekiah became king.
Right. Yeah, you don't see this kind of liberty to where they can travel completely. And again, Bob, I don't know an answer. I don't know that we have an answer to how they were able to travel. Although I can give you from a what's a better way to control the people? To have them scattered or have them all in one location? I'm all in one location. So to me, if they're traveling in Jerusalem, I got them where I want them. Okay, if the more people that flood into Jerusalem, so there may have been an ability to get in more so than to what? Get out of Jerusalem. And so, but again, my guess is as good as your guess. I don't know that we have how it is that in the midst of a besiegement that some people are able to travel and others are not. I don't know. But at this moment, people are pretty free to travel because the Babylonians have departed. But don't trust in it, he says. It's not going to last very long at all. And eventually the Chaldeans will return and fight. In verses 9 and 10, he tells them, don't think that the Babylonians have been weakened because what? Even if they were what? Even if every single one of them was wounded. Notice verse 10. For though you had smitten the whole army of the Chaldeans that fight against you, and there remained but wounded men among them, yea, would they rise up every man in his tent and burn this city with fire. So Jeremiah is trying to make sure that Zedekiah understands clearly this is a moment, not a permanent. And even if you saw the Babylonians in their weakest condition and there wasn't anybody but wounded soldiers outside the walls, they could still burn the city down. So don't be fooled by the momentary peace that has come to you. Lord willing, I'll come back. We'll finish chapter 37 briefly, and then we'll get into chapter 38 on Sunday morning, Lord willing. So I think we'll have plenty of time to do that, to finish this situation that's happening here in chapter 37. Jeremiah can't seem to catch a break. Jeremiah's in trouble when he's speaking up in Jerusalem. He goes back to Benjamin, to thinking he'll get a portion during all this challenge that they've been having, and it doesn't go so well for him. So keep reading, and we'll continue our study, Lord willing, on Sunday.
God's given him a short reprieve here.
Yeah. And Jeremiah doesn't even get to enjoy it. He's going to find himself in trouble down in Benjamin.